Right off the bat, let me start with why I chose to name this documentary as The Dark Side of a Brahmin. Caste-based discrimination is a perennial, undeniable, and a nasty reality in Bharat, whether you choose to accept it or not. And the first thing that hits anyone's mind when we talk about caste discrimination in Bharat is the seven-lettered word called Brahmin. And if anyone wants to know the truth about it, this is the situation that you would be ending up with. On one side, you have the oppressed Sudras who blame the Brahmins, saying that they are responsible for the caste-based discrimination. And on the other side, there is another counter-narrative saying that Brahmins themselves are discriminated right from the times of the Islamic invasions and the colonization, and even today, the reservation system. There are many levels in which the Brahmin community is suffering. Both politically and ideologically speaking, both these narratives are diametrically opposite, and they try to pull the narrative towards their cause. And knowing the truth for its facts is a very difficult task. And making this clumsy situation even worse, we have the religious groups who continuously beg for religious conversions, and they try to pollute with their false and fake narratives for their cause. And needless to say about the colonial inertia that we are still suffering. So in such a complex context, nobody cares to talk about certain basics which are highly essential to understand the truth for its facts. And just like the moon, everyone looks at one side of it, but no one cares to look at the other side of it. And that dark side holds the real secret to understand who is a Brahmin in first place. In this documentary, in next couple of minutes, I will try to bring forward who is a Brahmin precisely without any bias as much as possible. Drushadvichitra talpayor bhujanga mauktikasrajor garishtharattnalostayo suhrudvipakshapakshayot trunaravinda chakshusho prajamahi mahendrayo samam pravartayan manakkada sadasivam bhaje. This is not a prayer. This is the perspective of Shiva, who has the equanimous vision towards both people and emperors, treats a blade of a grass and a lotus alike. He treats the most precious gems and a stone alike. He treats a snake and a garland alike. Shiva treats everyone alike. This is the perspective that I am going to hold in my heart and head throughout this documentary to bring forward the truth about who is a Brahmin and reveal the dark side of a Brahmin. This documentary is loaded with a lot of subject matter, so I have to divide it into 5 different chapters of who is a Brahmin, the Manusmriti, women, Shudras, North-South divide, a lot more. And most importantly, I did not make this documentary for everyone. I made this for very specific set of audience. And to know if you are part of that audience, yes or no, here is a simple test. Some 1400 years back, there lived an ardent devotee of Shiva called Nandanar in the land of Tamil Nadu. The source of the legend of Nandanar comes from an ancient Tamil scripture called Periya Puranam. Nandanar, even though he is an ardent devotee of Shiva, he is a Shudra, deemed as untouchable back in those days in ancient Tamil Nadu. We are talking about more than 1400 years ago, back in the 7th century. And what I'm about to say is in one of the instances that happened in the life of Nandanar. He wanted to have a darshan of Shivalokanathar temple in Tiruppunkur, Tamil Nadu. But he is not allowed inside the temple because he is a Shudra. And like I said, back in those days, some sections of Shudras are deemed as untouchables. But still, Nandanar is really vying to have a darshan of Shivalokanathar just standing outside the temple. But then, in the straight line of sight, since there will be Nandi in front of Shivalingam, he could not have the darshan of Shivalokanathar. And the legend says that Bhagavan Shiva asked Nandi to move aside in the line of sight so that Nandanar could have a direct darshan of Shivalokanathar standing outside the temple. And the picture what you are seeing today here is exactly that Nandi, which is bent towards the right, so that Nandanar could have a straight darshan of Bhagavan Shiva standing outside the temple. This is the legend. Now whether you believe it or not is secondary, but this is the legend since 1400 years in the state of Tamil Nadu. Now you can test for yourself if you are eligible to watch this documentary or not. There are 3 important things about Nandanar. Number 1, the Varna-based discrimination has been there in Bharat even before the Islamic invasions and the European colonization. We are talking about some 1400 years ago. That's when Nandanar lived. And then, back in those days, he being a Shudra was the main reason that he was not allowed to have a darshan by getting into the temple of Shivalokanathar in Tamil Nadu. We hear a lot of right-wing narrative that is happening today saying that the British were the ones who introduced caste system and created all these fissures creatures in the society, but that's absolute nonsense. And Nandanar's story is a glaring example that some 1400 years ago also people were kept away from temples. And since we're talking about entry of people into temples, the Brahmins of those times are accountable for this discrimination. Period. That is the first thing that I want to tell you about Nandanar. And coming to the second topic, in the Tamil Shaivite traditions, there are 63 ardent devotees of Bhagavan Shiva and they are revered as Nayanars. It's true that Nandanar was discriminated and kept away from temple because he was a Shudra, an untouchable back then. But also people of those times realized that he is an ardent devotee of Shiva and Shiva appears for Nandanar for his devotion. And people realized their mistake and started revering Nandanar as one of the 63 Nayanars. And since then, over last 1300-1400 years, Nandanar is also revered in every Shiva temple in Tamil Nadu along with the 63 Nayanars as part of one of them. That means the Brahmins who are worshipping Shiva in all the Shiva temples in Tamil Nadu are also revering Nandanar, the same Nandanar who was once discriminated. Very important lesson, guys. Yes, we have a lot of fault lines and fissures in the society, but Bharat is capable of understanding and acknowledging those fault lines, and we are ready to correct our mistakes, and we have been doing that. Yes, the Brahmins during the times of Nandanar might have kept Nandanar away from the temple, but then after realizing what a true devotee of Shiva is Nandanar, and over the last 1300 years, the same Brahmins have been worshipping Nandanar along with the 63 other Nayanars in every Shivalayam across Tamil Nadu. And that is a glaring example that tells us we correct our mistakes. Coming to the third aspect I want to tell you about Nandanar. Dr. Ambedkar wrote a book called The Untouchables, which explained the plight of people over last 2-3 centuries. And he dedicates this book, The Untouchables, to Nandanar. Yes, Dr. Ambedkar might be anti-Hindu, but I deeply respect him because he stood up for all the oppressed people. Now, coming to the eligibility of yours to watch this documentary further, yes or no, is quite simple. If you would like to hear to the truth from both sides without any bias, just like how I narrated the story of Nandanar, then you are eligible to watch this documentary. But if you are right-leaning or left-leaning, without any interest to hear about what the other side of the table is saying, then this video is not for you. And I don't care how many views it's going to get. All I'm interested is to bring forward the truth, and I care a damn about who's going to subscribe or who's going to like or dislike. If you are here to listen to the truth, I'm here to tell you the truth. Let's get started. Let's start with the very basic thing. Who is a Brahmin? Let's try to understand the first chapter. I asked this question myself in the early days when I started Project Shivoham, and this was the first slokam that caught my attention. It is from Dhanurvedam, written by Vasistha Maharshi. Here is an instruction that Vasistha Maharshi wrote in Dhanurvedam. Acharyena dhanurdeyam brahmane suparikshite lubdhe durte krutagne cha mandabuddhyau nadapayet. The translation is, the guru should teach Dhanurvedam to a student only after thoroughly confirming that he is a Brahmin. Now, who is a Brahmin? Lubdhe dhurte krutagne cha mandabuddhyau nadapayet. A Brahmin is the one who is not greedy, cunning, ungrateful or foolish. Dhanurvedam should be taught only to Brahmins. Was that an infuriating statement? It would be infuriating if you are half educated. If you read the complete context, you'll understand that a Brahmin is the one who is not greedy, cunning, ungrateful or foolish. And that is the reason Bhagavan Sri Ram is taught Dhanurvedam by Vasistha Maharshi. In current societal standards, you can say that, okay, Rama is a Kshatriya. But if you get deep into the scriptures, this is what they say. Let's flip to Atharvana Vedam. Why I chose Atharvana Vedam? There is a very important reason. Of all the 4 Vedas, the daily life, the societal standards, how a society needs to function, all these aspects are essentially derived from Atharvana Vedam, predominantly in Bharat. Atharvana Vedam has been the source. So let's see what Atharvana Vedam is saying. Pippalada Samhita 8.9 Atharvana Vedam. From the Brahman arises Saptarishis. Here try to understand the nuance. Brahman means the supreme being. Brahmin, as an English term, means one of the Varna. So from Brahman are the Kshatriyas born, same way the Brahmins are born, same way the Vaishyas are born, and so are the Shudras. Every living creature is born of the Brahman. Whichever Varna you are, the source is just one and the same. And here it goes on explaining that the fishermen, people who are in the profession of fishing, or the servants, thieves, gamblers, everybody comes from Brahman. What I want to highlight here is the equanimity that Atharvana Vedam is showing towards whether you are a Vaishya or a Sudra or a Kshatriya or a Brahmana or a fisherman or a thief or a gambler, a man or a woman, there is absolute equanimity that Atharvana Vedam is unequivocally establishing. If you read the entirety of Pippalada Samhita, for instance, you'll get to know that. Now let's flip to one of the Upanishads, Vajrasuchi Upanishad, which ascribes to Samavedam. Vajrasuchi Upanishad is attributed to Adi Shankaracharya. And the name of this Upanishad as Vajrasuchi is quite interesting. Vajrasuchi means a needle made of diamond, so sharp, so hard that it will quite pierce into our heads with its thoughts, with its questions, with its content. Hence, Vajrasuchi Upanishad. My first reaction when I read through this entire Upanishad, it's quite small, it's not that big, but when I read through the complete Upanishad, I was really baffled. Why was this not made mainstream? And I'm sure that anyone who reads Vajrasuchi Upanishad will have the same reflection. Let me explain you why. I will briefly walk you through the synopsis of the Vajrasuchi Upanishad. At the outset, this is how Adi Shankaracharya starts the Vajrasuchi Upanishad. Brahmana, Kshatriya, Vaishya and Sudra are the four Varnas, and Brahmana is the chief among all these four Varnas in accordance to the Vedas and the Smritis. Now if a question comes to your mind, are you defending Brahmins? Well, I'm defending truth, not Brahmins or Sudras or whoever it is. So have some patience and listen to this completely. Vajrasuchi Upanishad starts with saying that the Brahmana is the chief of all the four Varnas. Then in this Upanishad, Adi Shankaracharya raises the first question, Kevo Brahmano Nama. Who is a Brahmana? Yes, Brahmana is the chief of all the four Varnas, but who is a Brahmana? Interestingly, Adi Shankaracharya doesn't give an answer in this part of the Upanishad as to who is a Brahmana. Rather, he leaves us with a question. And here is how the question goes. In this context, there is a point worthy of deep thought to understand who is a Brahmana. What makes a Brahmana a Brahmana? Is it the body? Is it the soul? Is Brahmana a class based on birth? This is exactly the question that Adi Shankaracharya is asking. Is Brahmana a class based on the birth of a person? Is Brahmana just a possessor of knowledge? Or is Brahmana the one who performs yajna? Who is a Brahmana? After asking that open-ended question on who is a Brahmana, Adi Shankaracharya proceeds to answer that question. Categorically, Adi Shankaracharya says that the birth of a person cannot make a person to be a Brahmana. Period. The most contentious question. Is a Brahmana just by the birth? Categorically, Adi Shankaracharya says that no. And Shankaracharya gives instances of a couple of Maharshis like Rishyasringa, Kaushika, Jambuka, Valmiki, Vedavyasa, Gautama, Vasistha, Agastya. Like this, all these great rishis were not born of Brahmana parents, but still these great rishis were Brahmanas. So a birth of a person cannot make that person Brahmana. This is what Adi Shankaracharya is categorically saying. And like this, there are many other propositions and counter propositions that Adi Shankaracharya gives in the Vajrasuchi Upanishad, and finally gets to a point where he gives a precise answer on who is a Brahmana. And here is what it is on the screen. Shankaracharya says that a person who, having overcome emotions, spite, greed, expectation, desire, lust, delusion, etc., with the mind unaffected by the pride, egoism and the likes of it, that person who is possessed of these qualities is called as a Brahmana. So a person can never be called as a Brahmana just because by his birth or her birth, but can be called as Brahmana only when they have the above said qualities, is what Adi Shankaracharya is saying, not me. Let's make this interactive. I'll give you 3 keywords: Guru, Sishya and caste as a barrier between them. This is the context. That's it. So from our Puranas or Upanishads or Vedas or whatever that you know, what comes to your mind for the first time when you hear these words or the context? A Guru, a Sishya and caste as a barrier between them. What comes to your mind? Hold that and I'll reveal in a couple of minutes why I asked that question. Let's flip to Chandogya Upanishad, ascribing to Samavedam. In Chandogya Upanishad, there is a story of Gautama Maharshi and one of his Sishyas, Satyakama Jabali. The story is about one of the incidents that happened in the life of Gautama Maharshi. One day, around 7 to 8 years old boy named Satyakama comes to Gautama Maharshi and requests him to accept him as a student. This young boy Satyakama has a lot of desire to study. He wants to get educated, hence requests Gautama Maharshi to accept him as a student. The first question that Gautama Maharshi asks this young boy is Kim Gotra? Gotro. This is precisely the word I highlighted here, what Gautama Maharshi asked Satyakama. Kim Gotro means what is your Gotra? Before you jump to that quick reflection of why such casteist question to be asked to the young boy, hang on. First of all, what is Gotra? Gotra is the identity of a patrilineal lineage. That means who is our father. That's what Kim Gotro means, because the Gotra essentially traces to the origin of the family tree. So here Gautama Maharshi is asking the young boy Satyakama on who is your father and what is your family tree. That's what Kim Gotro means. Satyakama is a very young boy. He doesn't know what's the meaning of Gotra. So he goes to his mother and asks, what is my Gotra? I went to a guru who asked me, what is my Gotra? So please tell me, what should I answer? That's what the young boy Satyakama asks his mother. And the mother says that she has been working as a dasi in many houses and has physical relationship with many men. And she doesn't know who exactly is the father of Satyakama. So she cannot tell Satyakama who is his father and what is his Gotra. And she says that all I have in this world is just you, and for you it's just me. So your Gotra at the best can be just me. You're Satyakama and my name is Jabali. So your Gotra becomes Satyakama Jabali. And that's about it. Again, I highlighted the words precisely what's written in Chandogya Upanishad. Satyakamo Jabalosmi. That means you are Satyakama Jabali. That's what the Gotra the mother gave to Satyakama. The young boy Satyakama went back to Gautama Maharshi and narrates exactly what his mother told him. That his mother had relationship with many men and he doesn't know who his father is, and his Gotra, as his mother gave him, is Satyakama Jabali. Witnessing the boy's innocence and his desire to learn, Gautama Maharshi says these words, Tamho vacha naitad brahmano, which means no non-Brahmin could speak like you, Satyakama. You are a Brahmin. Go get some darbha. I will initiate your Upanayanam with the Yajnopavitam, as you have not deviated from truth. A boy who doesn't even know who is his father. That boy is being called as a Brahmana by Gautama Maharshi. And precisely he gives the reason that since you are steadfast on to the path of truth, you are a Brahmana. That's exactly what Gautama Maharshi means about Satyakama Jabali. And then he initiates Satyakama with the Yajnopavitam, performing his Upanayanam. Yajnopavitam means Janyu. Gautama Maharshi set a great example which is valid even today. The way Gautama Maharshi accepted Satyakama Jabali as a student is very inspirational, right? Now let us flip to the most controversial story on the same lines of how and why Dronacharya rejected Ekalavya as his student. We all know the story of Ekalavya and Dronacharya, so I will not narrate that, rather I'll play this in a different way. Let's ask ChatGPT to narrate the story. I asked ChatGPT why Dronacharya declined to teach Ekalavya. Pretty simple and straight. And here is the response on your screen. Dronacharya declined to teach Ekalavya because he was not of royal lineage and belonged to a lower caste. And the rest you can read for yourself. A very well known story. Now ChatGPT is a reflection of what our collective thought has been. Or technically speaking, the large language model of ChatGPT just sucks the data on Ekalavya from the internet, which is a reflection of how we tell the story of Ekalavya. And what I get here is just a summary of that. So what you're seeing on the screen is what we know. Just hold that. I was blown away when I was doing my research and reading in Mahabharatam, the original source, about exact incident, what's on the question, on why Dronacharya rejected or declined to teach Ekalavya. The true story of Ekalavya comes from Mahabharatam Adiparvam 123rd Adhyaya. The encounter between Ekalavya and Dronacharya is articulated in just 3 slokas by Vedavyasa Maharshi. I'm going to run you through all these 3 slokas. Let's start with the first one. Tato nishadharajasya hiranyadanusha sutah Ekalavyo maharaja dronamabhyajagamaha. And the translation is, Maharaja Ekalavya, son of Hiranyadhanus, king of tribals, approached Drona pleading for Dhanur Vidya. I was blown away with the very word of Ekalavyo Maharaja. Ekalavya is addressed as Maharaja because he is the son of the king of tribals, Hiranyadhanus. Nowhere in Mahabharatam, Ekalavya is addressed as or portrayed as a Dalit or a Sudra in modern parlance. A simple commonsensical question is, why is Ekalavya addressed as Maharaja. That's a title for the kings. How can one say Ekalavya is a Dalit or Shudra? Let me tell you even interesting thing. Ekalavya is a cousin brother of Sri Krishna with a blood relation, with a direct blood relation. Krishna and Ekalavya are cousin brothers. If you read the original Mahabharatam, you'll get to know. Ekalavya by no means is a Shudra or a Dalit or an untouchable. That is absolute nonsense. Ekalavya is a Maharaja. Not my words, seeing it on the screen. Ekalavya by bloodline is a Kshatriya, a cousin brother of Sri Krishna. Okay, let's continue. So once Ekalavya approached Dronacharya, this is what happened. Nasatam pratijagraha naishadiriti chintayan sishyam dhanushi dharmajnas teshamevanvavekshaya. The translation is, Dronacharya, who knows what is dharma, refused to accept the Nishada Ekalavya as he might outshine his students. Dronacharya rejected Ekalavya because, looking at Ekalavya, he could sense that definitely he would outshine his students, who are the 105 Kauravas and Pandavas put together. And that is the reason he rejected Ekalavya. What people fail to understand often here is, Dronacharya is not a freelancer or a free man to make his own decisions. At times when he could not even afford a meal to his family, Bhishmacharya employed him in his kingdom as a guru to his 105 grandchildren. And Dronacharya made a promise to Arjuna to make him the best archer. So because of those obligations, he rejected Ekalavya, because he might outshine Arjuna and the rest Pandavas and Kauravas. My only point is there a caste factor here in the rejection of Ekalavya by Dronacharya? The answer is a glaring no. I don't mind if you call the entire Mahabharatam as a mythology or you don't believe all this stuff. No problem. My only point is, whatever that you are saying that right from the times of Mahabharatam there is a caste-based discrimination, and showing Ekalavya's story as an example, my only counter question is, what is your basis? What is your source? On what basis have you arrived at this conclusion that Ekalavya is discriminated on the basis of caste? I'm not defending Dronacharya as a good man or a bad. My only question, again and again I'm coming back to that point. What is your basis to arrive at the conclusion that Ekalavya is discriminated based on caste? On the contrary, the first slokam and what I mentioned about Ekalavya a couple of minutes ago directly proves that he is not a person from lower strata. So, let us educate ourselves based on truth, not based on propaganda. And the third and the last slokam in this entire encounter between Dronacharya and Ekalavya is, as you can see, then once Dronacharya rejected Ekalavya, he bowed down to the feet of Dronacharya and left into the forest and made an earthen idol of Dronacharya, and the rest of the story, you know it. What you are seeing on the screen is the complete source directly from Mahabharata Adi Parvam about the first interaction between Dronacharya and Ekalavya and why Dronacharya rejected Ekalavya and what he did after that. All that story isn't just these three slokas. That's it. There is nothing less, nothing more. So whatever that you derive or try to understand about Ekalavya should come from these three slokas. Time for introspection. Let's move on. Take a good look at this frame. Dronacharya and Ekalavya's story on one side, Gautama Maharshi and Satyakama Jabali's story on the other side. The pathetic state in which we are is reflected in this one frame. The great story of Gautama Maharshi and Satyakama Jabali, where birth of a person is not at all considered as an obstruction for a person to become Brahmana. Such a great story, majority of us are not aware. And on the other side, Dronacharya and Ekalavya's story, which has nothing to do with caste, is known to us in a completely wrong way. This is exactly the reason why I named this documentary as The Dark Side of Brahmana. Now, going back to the question that we started this chapter with, who is a Brahmana? I gave you references from Vedas, Upanishads, and now let me give you another mind-blowing reference from Mahabharata. This is a conversation between Bhishmacharya and Yudhishthira coming from the Bhishma Parvam of Mahabharata. Bhishmacharya is narrating to Yudhishthira, or rather paraphrasing another conversation that happened between Shiva and Parvati about the Chaturvarna system. And what you're seeing on the screen are the words spoken by Lord Shiva to Parvati explaining Chaturvarna system. Chaturvarnam Bhagavata Purnam Srishtam Swayambhuva. The four Varnas are created by Swayambhuva Manu. Swayambhuva Manu is believed as the chief progenitor of humanity, according to the Puranas and other literature of Sanatana Dharma. It is in his name we have this most controversial scripture called Manusmriti. And then comes another quote. These are the words of Ma Parvati towards Lord Shiva, asking a question. Kena karma vipakena vaishyo gacchati sudratam. Ma Parvati is asking Lord Shiva, how could a Vaishya become a Sudra? And then she goes on asking another question. Vaishyo va kshatriya kena dvijo va kshatriyo bhavet. How can a Vaishya or a Kshatriya become a Brahmana? And then she asks another question. Kena va karmana vipraha sudrayonyo prajayate. What will make a Brahmana to become a Sudra? Like this, she goes on asking certain questions related to Chaturvarna and finally asks one ultimate question. Trayo varnaha prakruptyoha kadham brahmanyamapruhu. How can all three Varnas, Sudras, Vaishya and Kshatriya, all three of them attain to the state of a Brahmana? How can each of these Varnas progress upwards and become a Brahmana? These are the questions from Ma Parvati to Lord Shiva. Chaturvarna system is not a rigid system that is steadfast only by the birth of a person. I dare you to challenge me with facts on this. Until the age of 8 years, a boy or a girl naturally belongs to the Varna of the parent. But from then on, the way he or she studies the Vedas, or not necessarily the Vedas, whatever is their education or the profession that they are interested in, that eventually and essentially determines the Varna of that person. Forget about the spiritual or mythological aspects from Mahabharatam, but if you treat that as a historical text, you can clearly see that the Chaturvarna system is always moving up and down. It is never rigid. And this very idea of caste by birth of a person and caste stays with that person throughout his or her life is absolute nonsense. And this nonsense, maybe British formalized it, but in Bharat also we have been following this rigid, crooked system at least for a couple of centuries. But when we go back into the scriptures like Mahabharatam or Upanishads or Vedas, not even one place it is mentioned that the Varna of a system doesn't change. It always changes. And I'm giving you the straight references from Mahabharatam. Shiva answers every question that came from Ma Parvati. I'm just picking up the two most important ones here. A Sudra can rise as a Brahmana. This is what Lord Shiva says. Shudro pyagama sampanno dvijo bhavati samskrutaha. A Shudra who has attained the Vedic knowledge becomes a Brahmana and is purified. The word purified is a very loose translation to the word samskritaha. Samskritaha has a very deep meaning. It's basically to elevate the person on multiple aspects, spiritually, mentally, psychologically, so on and so forth. So whatever be the case, so a Shudra can become a Brahmana. And then also a Brahmana could slip down as a Sudra. Brahmanyam punyamutyudya Shudro bhavati tadushaha. Such a person who is a Brahmana but still renounces his or her duties or responsibilities. Now what the responsibilities are, that's again a big list, but a certain responsibilities, if a Brahmana renounces, then he becomes a Shudra. The bottom line is, the Chaturvarna system is a very fluid system. It is not a rigid system at all. And the most important thing is, Brahmana is not an entitlement. It is an attainment. All the scriptures in Sanatana Dharma always says that protect the Brahman, protect the Brahman, protect the Brahman. When it says that, it does not mean that you protect a community which is lording over others. And at the same time, this community, Brahmana, has faced lots of wrath, violence, suffering, pain, even today, in the form of reservations. 100 years back, through the European colonization. 500 years ago, to the sword of the Islamic invasions. This community has been suffering, but thanks to the same community, because of whom we could access all the Vedas, Upanishads, Puranas and everything. But at the same time, the same community is also responsible for not allowing people into the temple. So there is good and bad, both sides, to this word called Brahmana. Now, I don't care if you like or don't like what I said. Let me go to where I started. Samam pravartayan manah kada sada sivam bhaje. My allegiance is to Shiva and truth, and I care a damn about what people think about me. Now that is the first chapter of the larger documentary I made, which is titled The Dark Side of Brahman. The first chapter is Who's a Brahman. In the next chapters, I talked about Manusmriti, women and Shudras, the North-South divide, and a lot more highly important subjects. Should you wish to watch the full documentary, I'll leave the link to the description below. It's more than 1.5 hours in runtime. I will let you conclude the video. Thanks for everyone who voted on this question. Some 7,000 of you voted for this question. What does a Brahman mean to you? As you can see, the poll results are on the screen. And coming to my responses, the green tick marks where they are. That's what a Brahmin means to me. I go with first option. They are the ones who suffered oppression over last few centuries. I also go with the second option, equally important, that Brahmins are responsible for relegating other Varnas and oppressing them. And then I also go with the fourth option, Brahmins are the reason for our knowledge systems that are preserved today. These three are my picks. So the Brahmins, as per the definition I explained in chapter 1 for 30 minutes, such kind of Brahmins must be protected. Equally important is stop complaining about British did this, Mughals did that. What are you doing? Maybe some hundreds or thousands of years ago, you can say that, okay, Brahmins did not allow everyone to read, they did not share the knowledge systems that we have, all that is fine, but stop complaining. What can you do in the age of internet? I'm sure a majority of people who complain that, okay, Brahmins did not share the knowledge systems to everyone. Bloody, they don't even take a book and start reading. So don't do this armchair lectures. Pick up the sources that we have and have your first-hand reading. People have this misconception about Vedas. There is no restriction on understanding or reading Upanishads. They are meant for everybody. I dare you to challenge me on this. Upanishads are meant for everyone to read and understand the essence of Vedas. Let me conclude this documentary, The Dark Side of Brahman, with a part of Yajurvedam, which is Sri Rudram, that significantly changed my life. After reading the essence and meaning of Sri Rudram, my worldview significantly changed. Namo Vratebhyo Vratapatibhyascha vo namo. Namo Agriyaya cha Pradhamaya cha. Namo Dutaya cha Prahitaya cha. Namo Stakshambhyo Radhakarebhyascha vo namo. Namah Kulalebhyah Karmarebhyascha vo namo. Namah Punjistebhyo Nishadebhyascha vo namo. Namo Mahadbyah Kshullakebhyascha vo namo. Jati Niti Kula Gotra Duragam Nama Rupa Guna Dosha Varjitam Desha Kala Vishayati Vartiyad Brahma Tattvamasi Bhavayatmani. That is the bottom line. That is the essence of Sanatana Dharma. That is all I want to say at the end of this documentary. As always, thanks for watching.